Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Ingrid Bradley, and I'd like to welcome you to the Abilene Christian University Online Writing Center webinar, Writing and Refining a Short Speech. Our learning objectives today are to apply assignment specifications to your writing, use the writing process, and to use notes to help with your delivery. We're going to use the example of COMO 120, Week 5, Assignment Number 3, How to Do Something Speech. In this assignment, the speech length is 5 to 6 minutes. 2 sources are required, and the instructions are to also give 2 oral citations for those 2 sources. That means that you're going to actually highlight those sources within the context of your slides and your oral presentation. You'll need to have 4 to 6 presentation slides. You'll explain how to do something from your work as a volunteer or at your work. What most speechwriters in an assignment should do is to pay very close attention to the rubric. Here are some key points for this particular assignment's rubric. The first is an attention getter. That is a startling or significantly engaging statement, and it fits with the rest of the speech. It grabs the listener's attention. Next is a credibility statement that establishes a solid connection with the topic, and it creates identification with the audience. It's a connection. Next, make sure that there is a thesis and that it is memorable, succinct, and it highlights the theme of the speech. Also, at the end of the introduction, there should be a preview of the main points in the body of the speech. This gives the listeners and the viewers an idea of what's coming. Listeners and readers want to know the organization of your speech. Those body points each should have a clear main idea with detailed explanations of each step in this instructional process. The body points should be done with excellence. 2 sources. An oral citation comes before the information is introduced. It includes an identification of the author, the name of the website or the organization, or name of the article and the year. The citation should be smoothly integrated into the speech. And that is something to refine in the speech itself, ideally in your notes, and part of it could be on the slide itself. There's a choreography between what you orally present and what is actually on the slide that the viewer sees. The rubric here also details that transitions should fit the requirements before the intro, between the body points, and before the conclusion. The conclusion should be signaled with a phrase or a signal word like "in conclusion," "finally," "let's wrap up," and the exact same thesis is said from the introduction. So in this particular rubric, the instructor wants the thesis to be reproduced, reiterated, and repeated. That thesis fits all the requirements for a thesis from the top of the rubric. The body points should be summarized succinctly in this conclusion, and it should end memorably. And the student meets the time limits. So there's a lot to think about here in writing a speech / presentation. General speech writing tips to consider. It's very important to stay within the time limit set by your instructor. It could be even your boss who wants you to write a speech. And you want to abide by the slide number limits. In this case, it's 4 to 6 slides. If you're given the limit of 4 to 6 slides and it's a 5 to 6 minute speech, in this case, you can almost plan for 1 minute per slide. That's about. You want to attribute your sources in APA style. Now, 2 of those sources must be orally articulated per the assignment. Include sources on each slide and also a reference page at the end. Outline your speech first. Determine the slide content and your note content. The note content should be bullets. And note content is what you speak from. It should spur extemporaneous verbal details and use the writing process. Now, after you have written your speech and your notes, feel free to send that to the online writing center for review. We do review speeches and presentations. Here's an example. You'll want to write the speech outline, and here's a fairly streamlined process to do both the outline and to start designing your presentation slides. Here's your introduction. We know that your introduction should have an attention getter, and in doing so, you can tell a story or ask a question, or maybe share a very startling, attention-grabbing statistic. Then you can describe the topic, the problem, or the objective. And then, of course, in that introduction, you'll want to share the main body points at the end of the introduction because it produces a very nice transition to the body of your presentation. Now, in this case, I decided to put into light purple color the details, which would be the verbal portion. So here you have the skeletal makeup of your outline right here. And in the next slide, you can see where I've taken the introduction and the skeletal portions in black, and I've added details, which can be my spoken details. And in this case, the attention getter is public speaking is the biggest fear of man above death, according to comedian Jerry Seinfeld. Now, I can decide, again, to use these as notes, or I can put those as key points on my actual slide. You can also tell a story. And here's an anecdote. I've always been shy, and glossophobia is real for me. That's the fear of speaking. And of course, you'll want to include a source. You can even select something like this story, this anecdote, and make that your chosen verbal citation. And the way to do that would be according to, and name your source. I've always been shy of glossophobia, and it's real for me. And according to such and such source, the definition of glossophobia is the fear of speaking. So you can see where you have woven the source into your story. You can also ask a question. Do you remember in grade school when your heart would pound and palms would sweat in fear that your teacher would call on you? Well, this happened my whole life and never went away. I still get scared. How about you? So this would clearly lend itself to a verbal portion of your presentation. But the idea here is that you've outlined the slide portion, and you can also write out your notes portion. Those are the items that you'll actually speak to. And here's an example of sharing a startling statistic. A certain percentage of the general population fears public speaking, and you would write out the source. Here's another opportunity to verbally articulate this information. And you would do so again, according to such and such source, a certain percentage of the general population fears public speaking. And then describe the topic or the problem or the objective. And here's an example. Preparation helps reduce the fear of public speaking. So you could put on your slide preparation, and you could put bullet points about what that preparation means. You can share the main body points at the end of the introduction. And here's an example. Preparing a speech involves a process of research, writing, and delivery. Again, the details will be the verbal portion, and you can use a heading concept for the slides. We've already taken care of slides 1 and 2 with the introduction. Now the body, we can assume that's slides 3, 4, and 5. And here, to further outline and organize your slides, you would take those main points introduced in the introduction, and they would each have their own slide. So you could have 3 main point slides, and you would include on that slide subpoints, and of course, your verbal notes. In this case, this assignment calls for an extemporaneous approach to the speech. So there would be no reading of the details. The idea is that if you do write notes, that you can actually glance at the notes and not necessarily read them. So you would want to do the main point and the subpoints for each slide containing the main points. Include your sources and decide again which 2 sources will be introduced verbally. Your summary or your conclusion could be slide number 6. There are very specific details for this particular conclusion. So you'll want to close in a meaningful way, include your references if there is room and in APA style, but also go back to the rubric where the conclusion specifies in this particular assignment that the thesis be repeated. Here's some points to consider. When writing a speech or a presentation, you want to plan and outline, draft, and then, of course, revise, edit, and proofread. Review the rubric specifically for items to include. Check your flow, check transitions. You can build those into your notes as well. Ensure, in this case, that 2 sources are included verbally. That can be done also in an in-text citation that corresponds with a reference at the end. And be sure to pronounce names properly and maybe even include the date for verbal context. Regarding OWC help, submit your draft or speech presentation about a couple of days before it is due. Give yourself time to revise after this review. Again, about 2 days or so. Here's some things to consider. Writing a speech uses conversational yet formal wording. Consider your context. Extemporaneous delivery requires great knowledge of your topic. There are no shortcuts here. And notes will help you stay on time, but don't read them. Make sure your notes are written out in a way that you can glance at them and practice. Again, notes should be glanceable guideposts only. Here are some key takeaways. Good speeches and presentations are truly the result of good writing. Knowing topics helps alleviate that apprehension that you might have in giving a presentation or a speech. Your notes should be glanceable for an extemporaneous delivery. And a process or instructional speech should be divided into key sections. And these key sections are easier for the audience to remember. Use the writing process. Make an outline, insert the details for notes, and decide on slide content. Make time for the online writing center review. Now, if you're writing a manuscript speech, that is a word-for-word speech that you can almost read from. You also want to start with an outline and maybe include stage directions, such as if there's a question coming, include a question mark at the beginning, cueing you that the question is coming so that you can inflect accordingly, like a question is coming. Double or triple space your document. Usually 16-point font works well. Time yourself. Practice your delivery. Even videotape yourself. Don't memorize your speech, but get to know the material extremely well. There are no shortcuts. The Online Writing Center is there for you. You can check us out at our homepage in My ACU. There's also a watch this video on that site for steps on how to make an appointment and how to submit a paper. And we work with you at any stage of your writing. There are 2 types of appointments that you can make. You can make an asynchronous appointment, which is where you upload your paper and we send you feedback within 24 hours in the form of a Writing Center report. You can have a real-time phone Zoom appointment, and that's live with one of the tutors. You just go to the schedule and click on the Zoom link at your appointment's time, which is always Central Time for the ACU Online Writing Center. You can also access many resources on the Online Writing Center website. Here's the submission process again. Schedule an appointment at WC Online and submit your paper to the week's Canvas box. We also have other webinars conducting all year long, but look on our website for specific dates and times, and also on our YouTube channel. Coming up in just a week or so is writing summaries of research and live edit review of a dissertation. Here are our resources that we have available for students. We actually have an APA course paper template that you can download onto your computer. We have a YouTube channel, and we have an Online Writing Center blog site. Contact us here, Online Writing Center, schedule an appointment, and visit us at the Online Writing Center website. Thanks for joining today on how to write a short speech and presentation. And we look forward to seeing you at ACU Online and emailing us anytime you have a question regarding writing. And thank you for tuning in. Take care.